Stay tuned for this story whether or not you're watching The Gilded Age. If you're watching, you've seen the show take the fictional Peggy Scott and the very real T. Thomas Fortune down south from New York City to Alabama. They went to visit the Tuskegee Institute, a historically black college. Peggy and T. Thomas were there to cover the opening of Porter Hall, the school's first dormitory, for their newspaper. The angle of their story was about how white New York money was being used to build a black school in the South. And that was true. The building was Porter Hall, named after the wealthy Brooklynite Alfred H. Porter. While he is not a character on The Gilded Age, the second person to donate money for a building on the Tuskegee campus was a character on our show, kind of. She was Arabella Huntington, the real-life inspiration for the Sylvia Chamberlain character. Let's get into it. But first, if you like these videos about the most scandalous people from yesteryear who make Ty's Hot Mess History a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload content. And please hit that thumbs up to support this video for free. Thank you. Now, on to why you are here. Tuskegee University is a private, historically black university established in 1881 in Tuskegee, Alabama as the Tuskegee Institute. It was founded by American educator and presidential advisor Booker T. Washington. The campus has been designated as a National Historic Landmark and is the only school in the United States to hold this distinction. It falls into the category of HBCU, which stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and many HBCUs, particularly those founded shortly after the Civil War, were founded and or funded by white philanthropists. The Tuskegee Institute was no different. Porter Hall was the first building erected on the Tuskegee campus. It was built by students. In addition to being a dormitory, it also housed administrative offices, a reading room, a chapel, kitchen and dining room, and a laundry facility. At the time of its completion, it was the largest building in the entire town of Tuskegee, and Porter Hall was named after the man who funded the construction of the building, Alfred H. Porter. Alfred Porter was a wealthy businessman who seemed to live a relatively quiet and peaceful life in Brooklyn. He organized a business called Hoag, Porter & Company. There, he made his fortune as a wholesale coffee merchant. He retired around the age of 50 and dedicated the rest of his life to philanthropy. His donation for the construction at Porter Hall was just one of many causes to which he gave his money. According to his obituary, he considered the crowning work of his life the volunteer work and funding that he gave to the Brooklyn City Mission, which ultimately helped it to become self-sufficient. His time that didn't go to his family and philanthropic causes went to his church. He became a deacon of the Church of the Pilgrims, the place that he had made his house of worship after leaving Connecticut, where he was born into one of the state's oldest and most respected families. He joined a different church after moving to a new home in Brooklyn, but remained connected to a church home until his death in 1902 at the age of 74. He and his wife, Cornelia, had 8 children, and it appears that 3 of them, 2 boys and 1 girl, died at childbirth or in early infancy. One of Alfred Porter's sons was named after him, Alfred H. Porter Jr. He went on to become the president of the very popular Royal Baking Powder Company. And slightly off topic here, but I think interesting, I was able to find a news article about a tragedy regarding one of his other children. Alfred and Cornelia had a daughter who died at the age of 17. She was killed in a freak accident after a delightful day of horseback riding with her friends. Her name was Mary Porter, and on October 19, 1880, around 5:30 p.m., she and her party were just bringing their gathering to a closing when just around the corner, on a side street, a bicyclist had ridden past another millionaire's wife, Mrs. Boynton, off of 6th Street. Her carriage driver was only described as a colored man in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. At any rate, that bicycle spooked her team of horses. This was their first day out on a ride with their family. The driver turned the horses onto another street in an effort to get them to calm down, and it worked, eventually, but not before they ran straight into the space where Mary Porter and her friends had been, still on horseback, just talking and laughing with each other. Everyone else managed to get out of the way once they realized what was happening, but Mary's horse was butted into his backside by the pole of the Boynton family carriage and one of their new horses. Their horse knocked Mary's horse over onto its back, leaving Mary pinned under her own horse because her riding habit got caught onto her saddle. Her own horse, then spooked too, eventually made its way onto its feet and took off running, with Mary barely hanging on to it, kind of dangling upside down, until her body finally fell off and onto the ground. She suffered fatal injuries and died later that night. And probably the worst part of it all was that in her party of friends who had just had such a delightful day was Mary's older sister, Nellie Porter, Alfred's other daughter. She witnessed her sister's death. Now, I know that I just went off on a long tangent, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that just a few years after this death of his child, an incident that could break most people and make them just want to shut down, Alfred Porter chose to dedicate his life to giving to his fellow man. Porter Hall was built in 1883 and stood for 20 years. It was demolished in 1903, just 1 year after Alfred H. Porter passed away. Then, another building was erected in its place. That was also funded by a wealthy white New Yorker. Enter Arabella Huntington, the real-life inspiration for the Gilded Age character, Sylvia Chamberlain. She was the second Gilded Age millionaire to fund the construction of a building on the Tuskegee campus. It was the Huntington Academic Building. After the 1903 demolition of Porter Hall, it would take 2 years to complete construction on the Huntington Academic Building. It opened its doors in 1905, and it was named in memory of Arabella's husband, railroad magnate Collis P. Huntington. The structure housed classrooms, offices, the women's gymnasium, and the school's bookstore. It became the academic center of campus, as Porter Hall before it had been. It stood for 86 years until it was destroyed by an electrical fire in 1991. That fire happened on the first day of class for the fall term. And many of the photos that you've seen in this video are of Tuskegee Institute students constructing that building in 1903 and 1904. Alfred Haynes Porter and Arabella Huntington are just a couple of the Gilded Age millionaires who funded construction projects on the Tuskegee campus. They are the same two who are in some way connected to the TV show called The Gilded Age. But in all honesty, a number of millionaires from that period donated a lot of money to HBCUs. Tuskegee itself also has a Carnegie Hall. There's Andrew Carnegie sitting next to Mr. and Mrs. Booker T. Washington. And there's also a Rockefeller Hall there too. In upcoming videos, I'll discuss more instances of big money Gilded Age people who funneled money into traditionally black universities. St. George's Private School in Newport, Rhode Island is not an HBCU, but it has a dormitory that bears an old money name, Astor. It's a beautiful looking campus, but I couldn't overlook this 1-star review of it on Google. This person alleges that the school was featured in a story on the ID channel. That's usually never a good thing. This person also misspelled there. They should have used the contraction for they are, but that's neither here nor there. The school is also on Purgatory Road, and that's a little different. But I'm off on another tangent again. Where were we? Oh yes, Astor. John Jacob Astor was the son of the queen of the Gilded Age set, Caroline Astor. He was also the richest man aboard the Titanic when it sank in April of 1912. I published a video about him and his young bride and their last day together aboard the ill-fated ship. You can check out that video here. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. And going forward, I'll have more Gilded Age scandals, more Titanic passenger stories, and Harlem Renaissance scandals for you. So please, stay tuned. My sources for this story are the Brooklyn Daily Eagle Archives, 1880 and 1902, HBCU First, Alabama Journal Archives, 1991, the Historical Marker Database, National Park Service, and Tuskegee.edu. This video has been brought to you by me. Well, my Patreon is a sponsor for this video. If you like these dirty scandals on my channel, then you'll love my Patreon, Ty's Too Hot Mess History. It has all of the stuff that I can't talk about or show here because it's just too hot, too violent, too sexual, too graphic, too much. Come and join us there for the hot mess history. The link is in the description box.